So it's 11:15. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So this is workshop 6 on vibrant rural areas. My name is Veronika Korčekova. I'm from ENRD Contact Point, and I will be moderating this workshop today. Before we start, I have some housekeeping rules. So first of all, please be aware that this meeting is recorded. Please keep your microphones off. Then also rename yourself with your name, organization, and the country. In case you have any questions or comments, please write in the chat. Or you can also raise your hand to speak. And we encourage you to use headset. What is in front of us for the following 1 hour and a half? So the theme of this workshop is vibrant rural areas, and it covers different topics. So it includes appropriate infrastructure, accessible services, employment opportunities, but also engaged civic communities. So all these topics are very crucial for the attractiveness of rural areas. And we heard this already in the opening plenary sessions. It was one of the outcomes of the public consultations and also of the stakeholder engagement workshops. And I'm sure it was also raised during previous workshops. So all these themes will be discussed in this workshop. And we will try to provide you also with the youth perspective on these themes. So I hope you will enjoy the following 1 hour and a half. We will start with 2 keynote presentations in the plenary. Then we will move to the groups, 4 groups. And after the group discussions, we will come back to plenary and sum up what was discussed and what are key messages. I am very happy to welcome here our speakers. So first of all, in the plenary session, we will hear Professor Tuomas Kuhmonen and Artis Mednis. Both of them will bring their perspective in their keynote presentations. Then in the breakout groups, we have 4 different speakers. I'm also very happy they joined. Andrea Lorenzini, Juan Lazaro, Sara Bianchi, and Jakub Dvorsky. So welcome everyone. And without further ado, I will now stop my presentation, and I would like to introduce first speaker, Professor Tuomas Kuhmonen, who is currently Research Director at Finland Futures Research Center, University of Turku, Finland. His research projects include, for example, foresight analysis in ruralization, H2020 project, the role of the rural areas in post-carbon society, vulnerability of the Finnish food system, and also future images of the rural areas in developed economies. Today, he will provide us with some key findings from the ruralization project. So, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I will try to share my screen. Hope it works. Like this. Yes, first, I would like to say something about the ruralization project. It's really a Horizon 2020 project. We have many work packages, but one of them is related to foresight. And we have tried to, in a way, get a grasp of the diversity or the multiverse of alternative rural futures with 2 tracks. We have made an inventory of the futures dreams of the European youth, aged between 18 and 30 years in 10 member states. So it's not a representative sample of the European youth, but it represents a nice diversity of different types of regions and different types of young people. We got 2,208 responses in our inventory, and it's targeted about 15 years ahead of now. And we asked 3 important ingredients of the future's dreams, like the livelihood recipe, how do you earn your living, the accommodation recipe, where do you live, in which kind of a place, in which kind of a house, neighborhood, and the lifestyle recipe, how do you live, what's your lifestyle, and the obstacles in realizing the dream. And in this way, it was possible to get some idea of the future's dreams of the current youth. The other track was more or less traditional trend analysis. We tried to identify different types of trends, megatrends, big waves, strong movements, trends, some local streams, which are valid in some sector or location, and weak signals, which are symptoms of change. And all these were identified and assessed in different contexts. So if a certain weak signal was observed in Spain, also the impacts of the weak signals were assessed in that context. So in this way, we tried to get a grip of the multiverse of different contexts in which these trends and dreams take place. Looking first at the dreams, as I said, this is not a representative sample of the European youth, but we were lucky that all types of regions or areas are targets of the future's dreams of the youth. We have 3 different types of urban areas, and we had 3 different types of rural areas. And we were able to kind of profile the different areas as targets of the future's dreams. Here you have the profiles of the 3 types of rural areas, like the rural areas close to a city, so within a commuting distance, rural villages, and remote rural areas. And for example, if you look at the profile of the rural areas close to a city, you can see that, well, there are certain topics or ingredients in the livelihood recipe which are more common among the youth dreaming about this type of area than in other areas. The same applies to accommodation recipe, the lifestyle recipe, and also concerning the obstacles. What was important in these types of areas that you can see the list of attributes is quite short. So young people who were dreaming about rural areas close to cities were people who really preferred living in this type of area. They had no long lists of requirements for the type of work or for the type of house or for the lifestyle. Whereas you can see that in rural villages and in the remote rural areas, the lists are much longer. If you think about the rural villages as the target of future dreams, this is in a way a manifestation of the local paradigm. So these people really would like to have a lot of community in their work, in their free time. They value the local. They certainly prefer the countryside as a living environment, which is good for the children. They need a garage or a barn to do something with their hands, and so on. And the remote rural areas, of course, there's the traditional agricultural, forestry, fishing, economic activity, which is more common here, but also working outdoors, working alone, working with hands, self-sufficiency, no neighbors too close. So that's important for these people. Simple lifestyle, living with little stuff, and so on. So you can study these more, but to give an idea that different kind of targets of dream areas have quite different profiles also what they should offer for the young people to realize their dreams. And also for the obstacles, the profiles are different. Typically, the profiles among the obstacles among the people who are dreaming about the urban destination are more often related to the young people themselves. So getting the education, getting a job, trying to cope with the uncertainty, whereas young people who dream about the rural destinations more often consider the society as an obstacle, so regulation, taxation, economy, values, politics, these types of things. So that's a glimpse of the dreams. Then turning to the trends, we observed 1,560 different trends, and these were synthesized after many steps into trend cards, which you can find at the website ruraltrends.eu. And what was quite interesting with the trends was that many of the weak signals, which part of which are presented here, were also included in the dreams of the youth. So community-based action, creative economy, degrowth, so living with little stuff, do it yourself, ecological housing, pop-up, energy communities, lifestyle, self-sufficiency, sharing economy. These ingredients, which can be considered as weak signals, were also important ingredients of the dreams of large part of the youth. So you can find these at the website. And to close with what to do with all this stuff? Well, I think we would like to provide the trends and the dreams as ingredients for creating visions. You can take the trend cards and look, well, how could I benefit from the trend in my location, in my decision making, in my business, in my economic sector, in my network, in my policy field, and then try to figure out a nice vision or a nice family of alternative visions through this exercise. And also, if you are interested or living or acting in a specific type of let's say, rural area, like in a rural village, of course, you can study the contents of the dreams and ask how to make these types of dreams possible in my place, in my region, and how could I remove the obstacles which are specific to this type of region. What's obvious, of course, that there is no silver bullet, there is no one trend which could bring about the positive rural regeneration. There is no one dream. All the different types of areas are profiled by different types of dreams. There is certainly no one vision. If these would be converted into one vision, that would be such an abstract construction that it wouldn't engage into action anybody. It would be quite flat. And I think what could be the most beneficial way to use these trend cards and the dream profiles would be to make thousands of different visions which observe the context of the areas we are discussing with, because the context is the key. The incidence of the dreams and the incidence of trends is very different between different types of areas. All the luck for this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tuomas. This was very, very valuable contribution based on scientific data, but easily digestible. And thank you also for your wish. So now we will move to the second presentation, but there will be, of course, room for questions after both presentations. So please, if any questions now, you can write them in the chat or you can keep them for later. And now we will move to Artis Mednis, who is currently a project manager at Latvian Rural Forum. In 2019, he was part of the team of the second European Rural Youth Parliament, shaping the European Rural Youth Declaration. Artis comes from a small village in the northern part of Latvia, where he started to be actively involved in youth organizations from his young age. And he believes that active and involved citizens are the key to healthy and sustainable democracy. So, Artis, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be a part of this workshop. Hello, everyone. I'm glad that the youth topic is also highlighted within the Rural Vision Week and that it is seen as important. Thank you very much for that. Today I would like to talk about European Rural Youth Parliament that took place 1.5 years ago, and I'm actually happy that the keywords used by Professor Kuhmonen are also overlaying with what I'm going to tell you about the European Rural Youth Parliament. So firstly, I would like to say a few words. What is that? What is the European Rural Youth Parliament? It is a movement that initiated next to the European Rural Parliament movement, which you might have heard about, most probably taken part at it as well. And the European Rural Youth Parliament is something similar, but for youth. And in 2019, it happened for the second time. And it is a movement that brings together young people from all over the Europe, from different fields, including young entrepreneurs, young farmers, municipality workers, researchers, and active members of communities, also from local action groups and so on. And as you see in the picture, we came together to put together our experiences about what is important for rural youth, what are the challenges, and what can we actually do. And so we shaped the voice of rural youth, of 70 young people from 16 countries that each represent their community, their organization, their rural business. We shaped the European Rural Youth Declaration that talks about 5 main challenges of rural youth. Let me say that these challenges, of course, there are challenges that cannot be accomplished within 1 day or within 1 year. These are challenges that need to be put in our agendas again and again. And I'm glad that within the next sessions, we will also touch some of these points. And let me just quickly go over what are the challenges talking about. There are 5, as you see. The first one is about diverse economic activities in rural areas. What we discussed is that mostly there is this stereotype that the only thing you can do in rural area is to do farming, which is a very good thing to do, because farming of rural areas provides us and it is like the key of our existence, I would say. But for young people in rural areas, it needs to be emphasized that not only farming is possible, but also other diverse activities within economics. And within this challenge, we formulated 2 calls for action, as for all the other challenges. And the first one is about increasing entrepreneurial capacity for rural youth by providing learning opportunities, by providing collaboration opportunities, and also providing motivation, sharing good experiences, and sharing inspirational stories how youth are doing business in rural areas, which is one of the things we did. We had Svetlana joined from Bosnia and Herzegovina, who talked about how she started a shoe factory in her rural area. And the second one within this challenge is from public authorities to to provide enabling environment by funding and infrastructure and so on. And this is very connected to other challenges as well. Moving on to the second one, let's say the most discussed within the public agenda today, connected to climate change. It is about sustainable farming and food systems. As I mentioned, having resources from rural areas is how we function, our society, and we see a lot of challenges within this field. That, for example, there is lacking opportunities for small farmers to provide for the local communities in the way to shorten the food chains, make them more sustainable. For example, there was a story from Slovakia that it becomes more and more difficult for small farmers to sustain their work, because larger companies are doing intense farming and providing also bad consequences with this for the environment. And so it is important to promote sustainable and organic food systems and to provide farmer networks that also gives a certification and approval for products that are sustainable and local and good for the communities. And it also includes shortening the food chains by promoting innovation and using other tools. The third challenge is broadband infrastructure and digital connectivity, also including physical connectivity. We see in these times especially how important it is to be connected, but also there are a lot of rural areas, remote areas are experiencing challenges, especially now, and this is also connected to this intergenerational gap that people who are elder, they are not always able to keep up with all the technologies and all the solutions we are using to keep our societies running. So within this challenge, the European Rural Youth Declaration calls for action, saying that there should be both public and private investments fostered within the field of broadband technology and physical infrastructure, and nevertheless also a strong digital development strategies implemented that includes providing education and skill sharing and making people more able to use these infrastructure tools to tackle other challenges. For example, the economical one, that you cannot do entrepreneurial activities if you don't have this infrastructure in rural areas, which is one of our workshop themes as well today. The fourth one is about public services and local governance. There should not be forgotten the goal of local municipalities to work on their local needs and to work to use their resources efficiently, involving citizens in decision making and making the decision making process very reachable and easy to add ideas to it. And that would be a goal to provide good environment for youth and other citizens to realize their social economic needs within the place where they are living. So it is very important for the municipalities to be active players towards tackling these challenges. And the fifth one, I would like to say that the most important one is about civic engagement and political awareness. As Veronica told about me, I believe that engaged citizens and active citizens is the key to how we can live in a peaceful and healthy society that is considerate about each other. And here I would like to emphasize that it is very important for decision makers to make the decision-making process transparent and inclusive for youth, and to empower youth to be included. And also important to think in long-term vision, that we do not make myopic decisions now that will affect the further generations later, as with the climate change. This was very shortly going over the challenges. I will in a minute tell you where you can find the full declaration and consult it. It's I think it's very useful because after the 2 days of work, we had a chance to formulate the most important needs of the participants that were involved in the youth parliament and represented their communities. And my final conclusion would be that I would like to invite you to look at this picture and see how happy the people are in this picture, how happy they are to have same thinking people around, that empower each other, that share their experiences and stories. And this is connected to the way of how youth are. I am a young person, 21 years old, and I could say, and you can also imagine that being a young person is not so simple. It is a time when you need to, time when you need to formulate your goals. You need to understand who you are, what will you be doing, and how will you interact with the other people, and all the other practicalities connected to our lives. It might be confusing. And that is why it is very important for decision makers, for the people who are actually already figured out how things are working, to be supportive and to step forward, not only wait for youth to come and approach them, but also step forward and encourage youth to be involved in the processes. And when the youth is encouraged, they can do beautiful things. They can contribute very much to our all common good. So that is very shortly of what was the European Rural Youth Parliament about. I invite you to go to the European Rural Parliament webpage, consult the youth section, and see the youth declaration. I believe you will find good points there to remember about. And also, if you want to be a part of the movement of the platform, we have this informal Facebook group you see on the screen, where you can join and share opportunities and discuss things you find important. I think that is all for now. I'm open to questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Artis, for this inspiring presentation, and also your personal testimony. That's really very much appreciated. I will now open the floor for the questions. We have time for 1 or 2, so please feel free to raise your hand in case you want to pose a question now, or you can write in the chat. And I see in the chat we have also a contribution from Marie de Bizien. Thank you very much, Marie, for sharing with us the other project on youth theme. Many thanks. So I don't see any hands. Okay, but in the chat I see one question from Mano. Maybe Mano, if you are fine with that, would you be happy to pose this question yourself? If it's fine.
Yes, okay.
Many
Hi,
thanks.
everybody. You listen to me, yeah? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Just wanted to ask from both about which are the 3 main steps which in municipality level must do to make rural life is more attractive for young people, for example. what is the steps, because as I work in a municipality level, like a council member, so it's important to know your view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mano. That was a great question. So maybe first, Tuomas, if you could.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. I'm also a member of Municipality Council in my small municipality here in the central part of Finland. I would suggest that, well, it's quite often that in the municipality work, we try to solve very current problems. And we have a bit of a look towards the history rather than towards the future. And what I found interesting is to kind of work with the futures. The academic futures research is about the designing and evaluating alternative futures. We always have 4 futures images, 3 scenarios, and not only one future ahead of us. And somehow I find it quite tempting to kind of create quite brave visions, alternative visions for a certain municipality, for example, like a vision of the municipality after we have given up the fossil economy, so the post-carbon society, with very strong remote work, with whatsoever could be relevant for the municipality, and then try to pull people with these visions. So present that, well, this is what we think could be possible. If you are interested in joining our work, then it could be something like this. That's one option.
Thank you, Tuomas. Artis, would you like to add in?
Yes. If I need to identify three steps, I would look at a very basic level, just to make you start to feel that they belong to their area, so they have motivation to contribute to it and to bring their ideas forward. And here I think there is a strong collaboration needed between the municipalities and the youth. And this can be done by supporting the youth work in the municipality, supporting youth workers, because they are building the bridges between the youth and the municipality. They are helping the youth to express their needs. And at this point, we cannot answer what exactly is needed for each and every municipality, because everyone here is coming from a different place. So this should be asked to the youth of the concrete area. And that can be done by strengthening the youth work and making the youth involvement processes as a part of municipality agenda, providing time for that, providing resources for that, and also trying to lose the distance, I would say, between youth and decision makers. A good example comes from Latvia, from where they implemented a youth dialogue project under the Erasmus Plus program. They do lots of different stuff with the local decision makers. They go camping, they go kayaking, they play karaoke together, and they become friends. So this way, I think the community is built on personal relations that are the most strongest and most sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Artis, too. Very practical and concrete suggestions. Thank you both. And I see another question in chat, but I'm afraid we don't have time to address it now. So maybe Tuomas, if you can respond in chat, then later. And we will now, thank you, we will now move to the breakout groups. I will quickly show you what we will be discussing in the breakout groups. So we have these 2 questions for the discussion. First one is what are the key ideas or strengths that should go into the vision? Where do we want to go? So it's about the vision. And then what are the step changes or conditions, actions needed to get to the vision from where we are now. So how to get there. So this is about the journey, about steps. So that's all from my side. I think this plenary was great food for thought, and I hope you are now really eager to join the discussions. And please, we can break out in the groups now. Thank you.
Informal online, but excuse me, but if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, either using the function at the bottom or wave at me, and I will try and help you there. Also, you can put questions in the chat if that's easier. I've just had a message from one of you, David, who's having difficulty with his audio. So if you want to put any questions in the chat, feel fine. I'd like to start off by introducing Andrea Lorenzini, I beg your pardon, who is a transport engineer working with Mednis in Italy. They are a mobility and a transport consultancy firm. Lorenzo's areas of expertise include shared mobility and public transport, urban and rural mobility, smart cities and urban logistics. He has participated in studies on transport, inclusivity and accessibility, service definition and co-participatory processes. And currently, Andrea is involved in the SMARTA project, which is supported by the European Commission and also by the European Parliament, to investigate the potential of shared mobility solutions and public transport in European rural areas. So I'd like to pass over to Andrea, and he's going to give us some of his suggestions for the vision of where he would like to see us in 2040. Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you very much, Susan. Hope you can hear me. And good morning, everyone. I'd like just to share with you some food for thought also for starting this discussion on mobility. So I just start because I got just 5 minutes, so I will try to stay within that time frame. So what could be the points to be included in the vision in terms of mobility? So the first point should be that we need to recognize mobility as a core enabler for rural areas and all its activities. Good mobility, we think that means access to work, education, services, businesses, society. And it can be also viewed as a cross-cutting multiplier that could improve or the outcome of other investment. And by contrast, if mobility is absent, there are a lot of issues and negative consequences. So if this is the first point, what is the second point? The vision should debunk the common view that in rural areas, everyone has a car. Of course, this is not true, but even everyone in rural areas actually own and use a car, that would seriously worsen traffic and environmental. But actually, many people cannot drive for reason of age, condition, or affordability, or many people will not like to drive for sustainable reason, for example. And therefore, in the absence of good public transport or other shared mobility services, many people cannot get around. And this gap limits their participation in the society, their earning potential, and their contribution to the economy. So if I may ask you, is it possible to live a daily life without a car today in rural areas in Europe? I don't know what answer you will say, but probably will be no. So what is the third point? There is an action, a need for action, time to act, as we said in SMARTA, first on policy for rural mobility and then on program to implement such a policy. In contrast with urban areas where we have seen initiative policies, funding programs for improving sustainable mobility, there has been less attention to rural mobility. And the lack of policy led to limited supply of mobility services, which led to limited mobility for people without a car. And also in the summary of the public consultation for the long-term rural vision for rural areas, over 50% of the respondents stated that infrastructure is the most pressing need, and specifically in terms of establishing a better public transport system. So what is the fourth point? That is, once the policy is in place, we need to develop a package of mobility solution to find a mix of organized form of mobility, public transport, and complementary measures, including shared mobility. Shared mobility spans from different kinds of services, including demand responsive transport, flexible transport, car sharing, carpooling, organized hitchhiking, and so forth. And this shared mobility solution require minimal infrastructure. We are not talking about tram or metro network, and can also be deployed rapidly, typically by local actors and using local resources if the policy is in place. So I'm gonna conclude now with just a few steps or action that are needed, how to get there, as it was the second question that we asked to ourselves. So we thought about 3 key points that should be developed: the policy debate, the Rural Mobility Forum, and a Rural Mobility and Technical Assistance Program. These are the 3 key steps that could be addressed. So the policy debate, this could be started this year and maybe reach conclusion towards the end of next year. It could be the basis for understand what are the rural mobility challenges, or to go a little bit more in detail with that, to understand what are the potential solution, and then to identify where there is a consensus for structural intervention for rural mobility. Could build also recent work done by SMARTA, Mamba, Last Mile. There are different projects that have been promoted by the European Commission over the last couple of years. And we thought that this should be also conducted with existing fora, such as the European Parliament Committee, conferences of ministries, but also event and conference of ELART, ERP, ENRD, and so forth. The second will be to establish a rural mobility forum. This could go in parallel with the policy debate, but the aim will be to become a permanent framework where we could have a broader discussion, where communities could be involved, municipalities, transport operators, agencies, and so forth, and start to enlarge a bit the discussion. And in parallel to have also a technical assistance program. This is because most of rural mobility today is organized by local actors using the few resources that they have. They have limited capacities, and maybe there are some specialists that have to learn by doing, and innovators that maybe have not a clear idea about how to manage the existing regulatory and legislative framework. So here the Commission could establish this Rural Mobility Technical Assistance Program to bridge the know-how gap and enable local implements to do that. And finally, at the member state level, there could be the policy and program. Usually by 2025, there could be national policies for rural mobility, fully articulated then at the regional and local level with the government's arrangement in each member state. And by 2030, more or less, a development framework for the planning, development, financing, and management of rural mobility. The challenge is also to understand how to motivate the member state to develop such a policy, and for that, the SMARTA project has also proposed some kind of pathways. So to wrap up, what are the 4 points that should be addressed in the vision? I can remind again, recognize mobility as a core enabler for rural areas, the first point. The second is to define the common view that in rural areas, everyone has a car, and understand the consequences of limited mobility. The third point, to time to act, to develop a policy for rural mobility and then a program to implement such a policy. And the fourth point, to develop a package of mobility solution, including public transport and shared mobility. And the case steps, the policy debate, the Rural Mobility Forum, and the Technical Assistance Program, as well as the responsibility for each member state to develop national policy. Just to say that you can find all these things, and maybe you can go more in detail at the SMARTA project website. That is www.ruralsharemobility.eu. Maybe I can put in a chat. And I hope this could be interesting for also stimulating our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. That was a very interesting discussion and very well summarised. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask my colleague Alex if he could now share his screen, just so that we can be reminded of the questions, so that we can have a short discussion around what are the key ideas and the strands that should go into the vision. Where do we want to go? Very just the right turn of phrase for a mobility discussion. Where do we want to go and how are we going to get there? So I wonder if anybody would like to discuss within the group their view of what they think should be in the vision for mobility. My personal feeling was that when I listened to the two keynote speakers, I thought, well, absolutely everything they said was incredibly interesting, but unless you can travel within a rural area, then, you know, how does it work? That's, for me, one of the most fundamental things to work out. And living in a rural area myself, I understand a lot of the issues. Is there anyone who would like to start us on that particularly? Or am I going to have to pick victims? Okay, I'm going to pick victims then. So, Judith, could I ask you, do you have any comments on what you think would be really important to include in a vision about mobility, to how we all get around?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was thinking about the responsibility. If we have this common mobility system in the rural areas, and it's always the question of always the question of the responsibility. Who will take the responsibility if the people will travel together? This is a basic question, but this is the basic of the trust also. When we have the clear rules on the mobility. So maybe we can try to talk about that if you have an example for.
So is this about the idea of car sharing, about who, do you mean who would take responsibility for initiating the idea, or who would take responsibility for the people in the cars, or how do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, if we have this car sharing system in our areas, for example, who will take the responsibility for the people who are traveling together and they have a small incident? Okay.
Ah, so like insurance, okay.
Insurance or something, yeah. That is a good example for this car sharing systems in the area of Italy or somewhere in Europe, because in our region, we have this system. It doesn't exist just because there are no rules or clear how they say descriptions, how can we use it or how it works.
Okay, so we need to have clear rules, probably at a local level, on how these type of schemes can be implemented. Would that be correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Did somebody, I saw Maura had her hand up and so did Brendan. Was that in response to Judith's point, or was it more of a question? Brendan's nodding his head to a response. Would you like to respond, Brendan?
Very briefly, and then pass over to Maura. But I think this is an excellent example of what Andrea was talking about earlier, the need for a rural mobility technical assistance program for know-how transfer, because you can be sure that communities in one part of Europe, or indeed outside of Europe, have faced such issues before and implemented such schemes. So it's about codifying and doing how to do things manuals. We've seen a very good example in the US where the Rural Technical Assistance Program has codified a lot of these different things specifically designed for small implementers, communities, where they can learn the basics of how to implement and do something, get the checklist of different things to watch out for and how to handle situations like that.
Okay, so you're suggesting that we would have that we would share the knowledge in the way that we share the knowledge with lots of other different things.
Sorry, if I may, is to go a little bit further than, I mean, it's great to have networking and projects where one site can help another. What's really, really helpful is to be able to codify it. So for example, if we look at the Bürgerbus in Germany and in Austria, where there's the volunteer-based minibuses, that has been structured in a how to do it, and there's maybe 400 of them now. Similarly, in France with the e-hitchhiking with Resupus, there's a small not-for-profit organization that has the mechanism to do this that will work with communities. And I think there are now 1,800 communities in France that have, or well, prior to COVID, had some form of e-hitchhiking. So this is a good example of how to transfer the know-how, not only on a bilateral basis, but actually in a structured way.
Thank you very much for that. Maura, did you want to say something?
Yes, and I suppose, first of all, well done to the speakers so far. Very interesting. Even speak there from the SMART project was very, very interesting. I think one of the ideas that I would like to kind of raise is awareness about rural mobility. I still think that even though we've spoken about this so often, and I was delighted to see that it became a key part of the survey results via the Commission, and that mobility was one of those key aspects, but still awareness. And I read a report recently in and around a lot of the aspects of COVID that we've all been facing, and how our restrictive limitations on most people for travel. And the report came out and suggested that really it was people in rural areas that were breaking this travel kind of restriction that we had. And I was astounded that there was absolute no awareness of the fact that the majority of these people had to travel past maybe a 5-kilometer distance to even get to a local shop or to get to a local anything. So there was absolutely, I was flabbergasted by the lack of awareness in a very high level report that mobility is a huge aspect of rural living. And I think if we don't even have this basic awareness, then we have so little, we've made so little ground. So I suppose from that point of view, again, this idea of policy at national level is something, I suppose, that's there. It's something that we can all see. It's very evident. But the programs attached to policy at local level, at national level, is something that we don't see coming forward. We have the policy, but the programs. We have a good local link policy in Ireland in relation to transport. But again, it's hugely successful, but limited. So I think, again, it's piecemeal kind of policy and program that's going on at national level, again, to kind of maybe pacify or create or give some kind of I suppose, a small recognition of the issue at local level, but it's not something that's hugely valuable because it's not rolled out on a major basis. I suppose a few different points there, Susan, apologies.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think that the main point for me, if we're looking at what we want to be, is we want to have an awareness at local level, at national level about rural transport and how critical it actually is to our area. I know, I mean, I live in a rural area. We have no shops closer than 15 kilometers away. If the kids want to go anywhere, they need to be taken. And so I think raising the awareness of these issues. I know, for example, I heard people talking about rural communities where people were having to travel 2 hours by taxi, the elderly people, to get their COVID jabs because there was no infrastructure, there was no other mobility options in their area. So I think raising the awareness has got to be huge.
Sorry, Susan, just one more point before, and then I will leave my points, but just one point in relation to, and this is some of the work we've done in the university in Galway in relation to our students. A lot of our students, we would be on the western corridor. So I suppose a lot of our students would be maybe 2 to 3 hours from the university. And a huge problem that we have is the mobility and the transport issues that students have coming and going to university, which means, and it has a huge issue for vibrancy in rural areas. Students that come from very far away from university tend to come and then they tend to stay in the university for weeks on end without returning to the college. So, or without returning to their home areas. So it means that students who should be leaving home or leaving a rural area in their early 20s are leaving that rural area at 17, 18 and 19 years of age. So that concretedness that we need for them to stay in the rural area is being lost at a much earlier age because of transport issues.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Brendan, did you want to say something? Or is your hand just still up from the last time?
Sorry, no, it's if there's nobody else wishes to speak just now, just to pick up with Maura, is that in fact even policy itself is highly fragmented. And I think Andrea was touching on this earlier on. And within the SMARTA project, we looked at the framework within which rural mobility is implemented in all of the member states of the EU and beyond. And what we found was that there isn't a single member state of the EU that has a comprehensive policy for rural mobility that sets out clear goals, that sets out targets to be met, that assigns responsibilities, and that puts in place a funding framework to meet whatever the goals are, whether they're high or low. And this is actually a fundamental blockage. And yet we see that in the same member states, there are such policies for urban mobility with very clear responsibilities, very clear targets, and very strong allocation of funding. So it's not to look for equal amount of funding for rural and urban areas, but rather just to follow the same principles that there should be a comprehensive mobility policy with allocated responsibilities and with the funding lines to match it. And I think, again, the Rural Link program in Ireland is a very good example where we have national coverage and we have the institutional and organizational capacity in place, but they have not been given a mandate to meet specific mobility targets. And the funding line they're working from is about 15, 17 million euro per year for the entire country. And that's not going to get you very far. So I think those are some of the gaps that we need to overcome and to tie into the vision, the European rural vision. It's a key enabler, as Andrea has said at the beginning.
So do you think that we could say that one of the key strands going into the vision is that we would want to have a comprehensive mobility policy which is well funded? Would that be something that we would like to put forward as one of the things for the vision? Is there anyone else who would like to join in the discussion? Tuomas or Julian or?
Yes, I would like to join in. I think Juan made it very clear that this awareness is very often not yet here. And Brandon, you added that we really need these concepts for rural mobility which are not in place. I think it's a big danger here that no one dares to answer to this question which Andrea put: if daily life in rural areas without a car would be possible. No one dares to answer, yes, this should be possible. Everyone assumes, well, it's not possible, and we agree to that. And all national policies agree to that. And they deviate and take actions in digitalization instead of increasing mobility issues. I think that's a big danger, that most of the strategies now focus on digitalization for rural regions and neglect mobility issues. And I think it's a huge problem in medium, long-term views that these aspects are treated only as a side effect. And what was mentioned in this discussion, it's really a very tricky process to increase mobility issues in rural areas. And we need many practical examples and really detailed concern working practically here. I think Maura gave several examples, and every one of us knows many examples how mobility is crucial. And also in the presentation, it was made clear mobility is a multiplier for other instruments, for other investment, and for other aspects of life. I think it's such a crucial aspect. If we neglect it or just say, well, digitalization can solve our problems, I think we fail here in the vision.
I think you're right. I think it's got such a big knock-on effect. If you think about depopulation, I know for myself that Maura was talking about young people in villages having to, leaving to go to university much younger. I was speaking to a neighbour the other day who said she's getting older now and she needs to move into the town because it's too difficult to, in fact, we have 2 neighbours in a village of 100 people who are moving into the town because rural mobility is such a key issue. And so if we don't address mobility, then we are going to have the knock-on effects with depopulation and all these other issues that we're trying to solve as well. So we need, I think, I would like to put forward as one of the key things is for where we want to go for this vision is to raise awareness and to share the good examples and the knowledge and the practical examples of what we've been doing. We still have 15 minutes left within our workshop. Is there somebody else who would like to bring in a point? Yes, Julian, please, that would be great.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to add, because Tuomas said that digitalization is it's totally wrong to put so much effort on digitalization, but I think there is one point: digitalization can reduce the need for mobility in some certain areas. So I think we should think it together, mobility and digitalization. Yes. And I also agree that maybe we should try to post the vision is life in a rural area without a car. Should it be possible? I mean, this is a key question, or this is maybe a big advantage of the city. I can speak of my personal experience. Right now, I come from a rural areas. I live in a city, and we are thinking to go back. But what does it mean? It means maybe 2 cars extra. It also means a lot more. You need a lot more money. You need a lot more resources to live in rural areas just because of mobility issues.
I think that's very interesting when you talk about the money that you need and the cars you need. I was listening to something on the radio where in one of the islands in the north of Scotland, in Shetland, they are now going to be completely self-sufficient on electricity to run electric cars in Shetland due to tidal energy, which I thought was a really interesting point. So probably along with mobility, we need to consider things like, for example, how we move forward to have charging points for electric cars. That type of thing needs to be thought about as well, I would say. Yeah, and also the employment to cover the costs that are possibly, higher with living in rural areas. Brendan's saying in the chat that he agrees with ruralisation. With Julian, that ruralisation is important, and I think the point that Tuomas is that we need attention to both digitalisation and physical connectivity, which I think is a very good point. Thank you. Okay, so how are we going to get there? How do we get to a situation where it is possible to live in a rural area without a car? Now that could be the big question of the conference, I think. Yves, are you wanting to say something?
Yeah, just yes, yes. I am from Montpellier in France, and my feeling is that the situation has changed a lot in the last years. There are much more possibilities, but the situation is very different. If you live, like we have seen before, the difference of rural area. If you live in a rural village or rural town, and if you live in a remote areas. But we have a lot of, someone has spoken about this, a lot of interesting system of car sharings, of spoken of réseau pouce, which is organized hitchhiking, and you have also system of you need a car, but you can leave your car at the entrance of the high road because there is a parking organized to meet people. And with digitalization, it's very easy to know that you can have somebody to take you for the last 50 kilometers you have to do. We have also here in France very cheap system of autobus. It's €1 to go from a rural village to Montpellier, for example, with 50 or 100 kilometers. And it's for young people, it can be completely free. And that is to say, there is a lot of flexibility. And just to say, in the award ceremony and in today's time, you have a project funded by a leader group, which is an electric car owned by the municipality, supported by leader, which can be shared during the week with the inhabitants. During the weekend, if the inhabitants don't need the car, it can be for tourist people. And also it's interesting. That is to say, for me, what it is important is to have citizen initiative or local initiatives to invent a good system. But I think that the problem of insurance, for example, has been solved at this level also, no? For the hitchhiking system organized by local citizens. That is, it's very important this topic to be at the heart of each leader group or area, and to say what it is possible to. It's not possible to, if you are in a remote area to have a bus to arrive to your place very easily. But sure, if there is a system of car sharing, of hitchhiking, you can find solution. And I think there are a lot of possibility, and the importance is to study, to learn about the examples and to invent something adapted to the reality of the area.
Thank you very much, Eve. I think that's really interesting. I think it's true. I think we need to have high level and local solutions, and we need to have creative people and to use these creative people to do something in their own local area. Brendan, you wanted to say something?
And I can add something.
Yes, of course, Eve, sorry.
When I have visited Scotland many years ago, we used the post office bus.
Oh yes, the post office bus.
It was wonderful.
Yes, for people who don't know, the people can actually join in and get on the bus that is delivering the letters. And very often they also deliver the milk and groceries and prescriptions for medical care in local communities.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eve. Brendan.
If I may, again, if there's somebody else wants to speak, please go ahead of me. But I think we're not short of solutions, and that, you know, anybody who discusses it, we have this solution, that solution. Just among SMARTA, Mamba, Last Mile, and a few other projects, more than 100 excellent case studies all around Europe, so they can be adopted. The two fundamentals I think we need to consider. One is solutions need to be packaged. To implement the post bus or to implement the ride sharing or something is fine, but it will not solve the totality of the needs of a community. So I think we need to go beyond demonstrations and pilots and individual schemes to actually looking at a comprehensive solution for a locality or for a region in the same way as we would for a city. The second is, I think that there's a role for both the national regional government and for the locality in this. The push needs to come from the region or the national level, depending on your country, that recognizes we have a serious problem that needs to be solved. It is blocking the achievement of so many other policies and the development of rural areas. So at the very minimum is to say there is a responsibility and people must be taught to do it and to put, let's say, the outline of the plan to do it. Separately, the implementation invariably needs to be at the local level, especially when we get into carpooling, car sharing, flexible transport. That may be a local coordination unit, the municipality, the community itself, and to be able to coordinate those activities. And sometimes that will mean that some regulations need to be at least relaxed so that community groups and individuals have freedoms to implement something that maybe are not particularly encouraged or even permitted under the regulatory regime. And I think that's something that the International Transport Forum, ITF Working Group on Innovative Mobility for the Periphery, they're examining those issues at the moment and should report in May.
Okay, so if from what I'm taking from that is that we, for how to get to our vision of living in a rural area without a car, that there are a number of solutions which are available to be shared, but what we need to do is to package them to first of all to get regional and national recognition of the issue, and then to have an overarching structure of how we package them together to resolve these problems, and then we need to implement them at a local level. Yeah. there anyone else who would like to add something to this? We still have 5 minutes, so we've still got a chance to have a few more things. David, David was trying to speak, but he said nothing came through. What a shame. I don't know if there's anything that the technicians can do to help, or whether it's possibly just at your end. No, Maura?
Susan, yeah, I just wanted to pick up on again something that Brendan had said there. You know, I think that down through the last years, we've learned so much about kind of local level, local participation, you know, from the LEADER program, from everything, this kind of idea of bottom-up development. And I think really, you know, yes, we absolutely need the EU recognition, we need the national, we need the regional kind of policies, programs and strategies. But sometimes mobility, solutions can come from the bottom. It can come from local communities. And I suppose we need political buy-in. We need programs that will allow that kind of local level mobility to happen at a local level. And I think it is just within a local community that they know exactly what works in relation to mobility and transport for their community. So allow them that kind of autonomy to develop that program within the systems that we have there. Like, we have a lot of the policies in place, we have a lot of the programs in place. We just need something that works at a local level. So I think giving and allowing them people tap into, I suppose, the strategies and thinkings that we already have in relation to rural development and apply it most definitely to mobility.
Okay. Alex, Alexia, was there anything you wanted to add in this at all?
No, thanks. I'm very much in the listening mode.
You're in the listening mode, okay.
Learning a lot and knowing a lot about SMARTA and their excellent work already. So I'm happy to see it spreading.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Andrea, do you want to come back to us on the things that you've heard? I mean, I think you must have, you certainly started us off on a great foot. So maybe you would like to come back and just kind of finish up where you feel we are.
Yeah, I can add a few points. And good to see that we are at least reaching us a kind of consensus also here, a small group of us. I think it's very, very important. And awareness of rural mobility issues and possibilities is probably one of the key aspects. I agree with you, Maura, that the top-down initiative, also as promoted by SMARTA, is at the policy level, but it's clear that at the implementation and development level, there is the need to involve communities, to involve local actors, to really understand what are the needs and how to meet these needs. It's what we call a package of mobility solution. It means that you really see what are the characteristics of the areas, of the population, of their mobility needs, and then to understand what could be the best solution to meet these needs. So I think that's a good point. And the other is just to say that we also, in the SMARTA project, get a very interesting aspect in Flanders, in Belgium, where they are, for the first time, they are trying to revise their attitude or policy toward mobility, and they are thinking about basic accessibility. So how to really provide services to people, how people can access to services, and with this, having that kind of integrated vision for that, where there could be the public transport, that could be the backbone of mobility, but then we need to have access to it. So here we could the last mile connection, we could have different forms of shared mobility and things like that. So I think that, yeah, we are step by step moving forward to this, but I agree that we need to put higher this on the EU agenda, and especially on national and member state agenda, because it is really time to act. So that will be my comment.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is, I know that we've got a comment in the chat, which is from David Miller. He's saying that he agrees with the local community that has the best insight to the need. There's an example in Scotland illustrated why two neighbouring communities could not coordinate shared purchases and running of electrical vehicles, reflecting two very different patterns of demand. One village focusing on the community and the other on access to services. So two investments were required. It reminds us that local does not necessarily equate to efficient, but is sensitive to actual need. So I think that's a very valuable point as well. And I think the other thing we need to remember, one of my favorite sayings, is that every rural community is different, and therefore we need to consider that, you know, in the way that we are not one, we're not just one rural is not the same in different parts of Europe or anywhere else, and it's not even the same within each member state. So we need to take the very local points into view. So we have about 45 minutes left, 45 seconds left. So I'm going to say, try and wrap up this in the following session. If there's any points that I missed that you feel are very important, please do shout up. But we've been taking notes the whole way through, and we will try and reflect this really rich and interesting discussion that we've had moving forward, and take your views and try and encourage them to be included in the vision that we have for our long-term rural areas. And then I think if we have a countdown of a couple of minutes, you'll just be zooming back into the other room and joining the others.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Andreas, and thank you very much again, and everybody for your.
So we are now all back in the plenary. Welcome back. I hope you managed to discuss all vibrant themes in the breakout discussions. And now at the beginning of this plenary session, I would like to invite you to contribute with some of the most important keynote words to the word cloud. So I will share with you the Mentimeter code in the chat, and please you can visit menti.com, and by putting in this code you will get to a very short survey where you can put your 3 keywords that are most important in your opinion. So this is just the beginning, and now we will move to the reporting part. So we will quickly summarize what was discussed in each group, and we can start with the group number 1 and Susan, and this group discussed mobility. So Susan, please.
Yep, sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. I think that is the word of the year. Okay, well, I'd like to thank our participants very much. We had a really interesting discussion on mobility, and our vision, we have a very clear vision. It's not an easy one, but we would like to see the possibility of living in a rural area without the need to own a car. So there you go. There's a big key idea that we have. And we felt that when you look at living in a rural area, there are so many different aspects that can be reliant on the need to get and travel around. I think the other thing that our vision would be is that we would raise awareness of the really important, the key importance of mobility in planning and in thinking at national level and regional level, and then also implementing at local level. So raising the awareness of the importance of mobility. And do you want me to do a third one, or shall I leave space for other people? I think they will have others.
I mean, you can still cover also the third one, and we will add in if it will be overlapping.
The other one would be that we had a comprehensive mobility policy which had funding behind it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, many thanks, Susan. So this was about the vision for the future, and we will come back also to the actions. But now let's move to the second breakout group facilitated by David. And this group was discussing employment.
Yeah, and I think that, thanks, Veronica, there are a few issues that I will want to raise. One is new job opportunities which address depopulation and aging. That was the first kind of main point, is thinking about those aspects of addressing directly the depopulation and aging issue and creating the new opportunities. The second point was adapting to the new situation in rural areas in terms of training and employment. So that means diversification, it means agriculture 4.0. And a lot of these points came from our keynote speaker, our elevator speaker in the breakout group, Juan Antonio. And the third point, there's another one I can certainly bring in, which is trying to create a new model that gets us past bureaucracy. So getting access to grants, and we've got some solutions I'll come back to later, but trying to find a new model that goes past the current bureaucratic burden.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And I will, this nicely leads to my group actually, and what we discussed, because we were discussing services and we had very fruitful discussion. And one of the points raised was also the right incentives for professionals working in services. So this is very important for keeping people employed and in services areas, in rural areas, and also to motivate them to stay employed there. So I would say incentives for employment in services. And here we were discussing also that forward-looking solutions for 21st century are needed for the services in general, because there are also different approaches to e-health, e-education, but at the same time we know that in rural areas we might need, some of the professions won't be needed in the future, and that there are some possibilities for partnering solutions between schools, for example, or for multi-age classrooms, for 1-minute clinics. And also the quality of homeschooling needs to be kept in mind. So all of this, it is one package, and I would just call it forward-looking solutions, taking into account the different aspects of the services and aspects from 21st century, not from the past, but what is there from the future. So this was a point discussed. And then I would raise also the cultural dimension of the services provided in rural areas. So not only provision of basic services is important, of course it is, and it is essential, but it was raised that we need to be aware that also cultural dimension of services is needed for people to be attracted to rural areas. So social infrastructure, hubs, flexible hybrid places, where you will find, for example, library, coffee shop, community meeting room. In the past, churches were places where people were meeting. Currently, it has been changing, and we don't have places where to meet. This social dimension of life in rural areas is kind of disappearing. So we need to think about it as well. So that's from my side. And now the fourth group was Flavio's group, and they were discussing civic engagement.
Thank you, Veronica. And first of all, let me again thank everyone who contributed to the discussions, because we were coming back in plenary right when I was about to say thanks to everyone. So thank you indeed for your contribution. I'm going to give you 4 points, potentially ideas, rated as step changes. And these are, I think we all agreed as a precondition, if we need to engage and to stimulate the engagement, civic engagements of the rural people, first of all, we need the people. And so indeed, we need to get all the public policies, relevant public policies, working well to provide the infrastructure and services to actually maintain the people, especially the youth in the area. Otherwise, there won't be anyone to be engaged. So that's a first step. A second important point, a very nice idea that was shared by colleagues, is about supporting the formation, the education of young project managers from the local communities, but trained also in an international perspectives, and as this would allow in a way to support the formation of project promoters that are perfectly aware of what are the local needs that can be addressed with the funding opportunities of projects that can be developed. And at the same time, this is a good opportunity to reconnect the international dimensions with the local one, also replicating interesting initiatives carried out somewhere else, if we manage indeed to promote such formation. Also as additional ideas, further support private businesses in providing and delivering also some social benefits, also for instance some educational programs that in many cases are implemented by private entrepreneurs as a side additional business, delivering some benefits for the society, for the rural communities. We have talked a lot about, of course, the important role played by the local action groups in animating the territory and the role of the facilitators, of course. But we also said that people keep being, in many cases, shy in being involved, and so it's very much important that public entities keep making an effort in providing for further opportunities to engage the rural people and for people to gather and be involved. And these were, oh yes, it might not be an idea, but at least a recognition. I think we saw in many cases, we also some great example of solidarity during the crisis, during the pandemic emergency. So we might struggle to involve the community, and indeed there is a need for public support, but in many cases the rural communities were very much good in activating themselves in supporting each other during the crisis. And I think we should move from that solidarity example for the future and build on that one.
Thank you, Flavio. Very fruitful discussion too. For the second part of the Miro board, you see that there is part of our journey, so the steps needed to get to our vision. We have 4 minutes left, so I would invite my colleagues just to come with one point. If possible, for my group, it would be kind of benchmarking for rural services. So developing a package of reasonable minimum services. Maybe we can call it, it was mentioned in our group, rural public service portfolio. So some kind of minimum package that need to be there in rural areas. Yeah, that need to be there. So that's for my group. Susan, David, Flavio.
I can go next.
Ready?
If that helps.
Perfect. Thanks.
I would like to say that we would like to think about having a rural mobility technical assistance, really in order to share know-how and transfer learning between people. But we do feel that we're on the journey. We're not there yet, but we do feel that we're on the journey.
Yeah, clear. Many thanks, Susan. David?
Okay, I'll come in. Yeah, very quickly. Simplified and inclusive governance, especially at local level. We need more women involved. We need more young people and groups, young youth groups involved in that. And I'm going to summarize it. We'll get the detail later, don't worry. Simplified reporting processes. We've got to get that model in place, which means it's managing risk appropriately.
Clear. Thank you, David. And Flavio, or if you have covered it already.
No, but I think building on the strongest idea that came out from our discussion. So promoting the formation of local and young project managers. I think that should be also step changes. So providing a formation or opportunity for formation of local and young project managers in project cycle management with the support of public authorities and private entrepreneurs. So a course of study, whatever you want to call that, education opportunity for forming that kind of professional figure, let's say, professional role that can lead the development of the territory.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Flavio, and thank you all, not only my colleagues who facilitated discussions, but also everyone who joined the discussions, and also thank you, Christina, for noting down all the points in Miro board. before we end, and we have still 1 minute, I want to share with you this great word cloud that we created together, and it is still changing. So please feel free to contribute also after the workshop. I see the rural women, simplification, community youth, broadband, awareness of rural mobility, all important points. And we will of course keep this for later, so no worries. Last 2 announcements. So 2 presentations from today will be available online on our ENRD webpage. And please, today is the last day of voting for Rural Inspiration Awards. So my colleague Christina will now post the link in the chat. So please join if you haven't done so. And this leads me to my final announcement. Thank you again, everyone, all the speakers, all the facilitators, everyone involved. And I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and it was good and inspiring for you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.